what words or word or phrase would you use to describe, to define, to characterize the following person? A man in charge and leader of his army who did not go to battle, who stayed home instead. A man who raped the wife of one of his elite soldiers, and when the woman became pregnant because of the rape, used cunning deceit to try to make the soldier the father of the child. A man who, when he could not cover up the rape of the wife and her pregnancy, used his power as the commander of the army to have the husband, an elite soldier, killed in battle. What word or words or a phrase would you use to describe such a man? Cowardly? Murderer? Dishonest? Predator? Evil? Rotten? Despicable? Loathsome? Great? Powerful? Admirable? Contemptible? Praiseworthy? What words would you use to evaluate such a man? Of course, we are talking about the great King David, who played the harp while worshiping God, who killed with a slingshot the Philistine giant Goliath, who ruled Israel and Judah for some 40 years, who is often given credit for a number of the Psalms, though this is not factual. This is a story of rape and murder, of sexual misconduct of the highest order, and egregious abuse of power. We are left to ask, where is the God we worship in this story? But first, a few questions. Do you worship power or morality? Do you worship power or morality? Think about who you are and how you lead your life. Are you impressed by the power of a man like David? Or disgusted by his evil character? Show of hands. Do you think this was the only time in his life when David behaved so reprehensibly? No hands. Or do you think there were patterns here that we do not know about? Do religions separate themselves from people like David, or more often use them to their own ends. Why did the gospel writers want Jesus to be descended from David? From a man so completely unlike Jesus, the Jew from Nazareth. Like kings before and after him, into the 20th century, David claimed a special relationship to God. Since kings derive their authority from God, they are not accountable to earthly powers. The divine right of kings. You have heard that phrase. You once studied it. This is, of course, nonsense. We today are holding David accountable, and we do so in the name of our God. We worship a God concerned first and foremost with right and wrong, with right and wrong, with justice. Moreover, we worship the powerlessness of Jesus. Think back to that question. Do you worship power or morality? We worship the powerlessness of Jesus, the least among us. A God who would disdain David and his ilk, the David-like leaders of our day. Didn't God forgive David? Why? How? Do you see? Do you read any contrition in David? Any remorse? Any sorrow for his rotten character and his ghastly crimes? The church sells forgiveness today like a cheap fabric. Everything is forgiven every week. People walk around thinking that they are forgiven because the church says so. Where is the work that takes you from sin to forgiveness? True freedom is in that work. You do it or you don't do it. But remember, everything is not forgiven. Would a tyrant like David ever be forgiven? We can only imagine the magnitude of his crimes. The Bible would be twice as long if they were recorded. Are there leaders like David in the world today? Are you kidding? Everywhere you look. The leaders anywhere who truly serve other people is a pitifully small number around the world and in the United States of America. Most leaders serve themselves and with the help of others lie to themselves about it. Why are we told stories of Jesus having no place to lay his head, of being born in a barn, of the Roman soldiers casting lots for his rag-like clothing, because he had and took nothing? He had and took nothing. His was truly a life of service, utterly unlike King David. Are you a giver or a taker? Are you a giver or a taker? Does this, by the way, make Christianity a better religion than Judaism? Of course not. Has Christianity followed the morality and the humility of Jesus? Not for a minute. But the scriptures if we pause and if we look, the scriptures describe quite clearly certain types of character and certain moralities, and we need to pay attention. Our souls are in the balance. King David did dastardly things. He raped a decent woman and killed a good man, and you need to decide where you see yourselves in this story, and don't be too hasty. Where's the good news this morning? Why was Uriah the Hittite murdered in such a low-down manner, using the very army of which he was a glorious part? Because he was an honorable man. He had to be killed. While his fellow soldiers slept outside, he would not eat and drink and make love to his wife. He said just that to King David. Think of speaking truth to power. He said just that to King David. And so, in speaking the truth and being honorable, he sealed his fate. He carried the instructions himself for his murder. Uriah the Hittite lives on in the scriptures for us to know about and ponder. Are you more like King David, or are you more like Uriah the Hittite? A question for the ages. And if we look just at character, we can see that Jesus was descended from Uriah, not David. The question for us this morning is one of discernment. Do we see what this Bible passage is really about? Do we apply it to our own lives and to the world around us? Do we see human history with Uriah and David in mind? Do we see the history of religions with David and Uriah in mind? Think of the sex scandals in the church, not just the Catholic Church, the Protestant church. And people are moving forward like that's all forgiven. Where's the contrition? Where's the sorrow? Where's the remorse? How can it be forgiven? March on. Keep David and Uriah in your mind when you look at the history of religions and the history of humankind. It is said that God forgave King David because he loved him, casting forgiveness and God's love for humanity in the cheapest terms. Does this thinking, this bad theology, permeate in our life today? Do bad leaders around the world in 2024 use such thinking? Putin and the Russians invaded Ukraine under utterly false pretenses. Lie upon lie. The Christian church in Russia doesn't just forgive Putin and the Russians. It supports the war effort. Meantime, 150,000 Russian troops have died in the war. Their lives flushed down the toilet of history in exchange for evil purposes. For God, our God, life is sacred. Life is sacred. Leadership is not sacred. Life is sacred. Every life, everywhere, life itself. Not so for David and Putin and many, many other leaders around the world and in the United States of America. How do we structure our lives How do we think about our lives, our societies, our religions? To honor what is sacred to God, life itself. Yes, our lives, but every other life. How do we respond to the ongoing, life-destroying catastrophe of climate change? Beware bullies. Beware chest pounders. Beware liars. Beware the rich and powerful. Beware the ultra-successful, those who speak for their people. Think Jesus and his virtue as he stood without power against the power of the Roman Empire and the religious authorities of his day. Our sympathy this morning lies with Bathsheba. Our pride in what a human being can be, lies with Uriah the Hittite. Our shame lies with the great King David. King David was an evil man. Amen.